So far, again, we are still in day one. We have talked about PowerShell overview. What is PowerShell? Why do we use PowerShell? What is PowerShell ISE? And we have also discussed variables and variable types. Now for the second half of today, we're going to go over operators. We'll discuss what are operators and why do we use operators. However, before we begin discussing operators, I want to go ahead and quiz you over the first half of the portion today. Anytime you see a quiz at the top, you'll know these are the questions that will be asked on your verbal. Now again, for your verbal exam, it's going to be 10 questions. All right, you have to get at least an 80% to pass. So you have to get at least 8 out of the 10 questions correct. So again, as we're going over these quizzes, make sure that you're taking notes, making sure that you understand what questions will be asked of you in that verbal quiz. All right, so let's go ahead and go through this. So question 1, what are the 5 variable types we discussed day 1? And again, you can go ahead and pause it after each question. I'll go ahead and give you the answer, but go ahead and pause it just to make sure that you're understanding and that you can actually answer before I give you the answer. So the answer to question 1 is B Nash, Boolean, numbers, array, string, hash table. Question 2, variables always begin with what character in PowerShell? Well, we talked about this. They always begin with the $sign. Question 3, variables are case sensitive in PowerShell. Is that true or is that false? Well, we know that is false because variables, if they are uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter, right? So variables can be uppercase, lowercase, and they'll actually still be able to read it. So in that case, question number 3 would be false. It doesn't matter. They are not case sensitive. Question 4, when assigning a string variable, what must surround the characters of the string? Well, that would be quotation marks. Question 5, items in an array are separated by what character? Well, we know that an array is a list of items and they're separated by commas. Just a bonus question, items and hash tables are separated, or I guess when I say items, key value pairs in hash tables are separated by what character? In that case, it is the semicolon. The range operator is defined as what, and what function does it perform? Well, the range operator is defined by 2 dots, and the range operator creates an array that has the values of the first number all the way to that last number. So for example, the range operator, if we have 1.5, would be the numbers from 1 to 5 stored in an array. Question number 7, what is the difference between those two variable x's? Well, the first variable x, we notice, is an array because it has commas separating these 3 items, and this would be an array of 3 strings. Notice the second one, this entire thing is encapsulated by quotation marks. Therefore, this would be a string. All right, just one string. So this is an array of 3 strings, so 3 items that are strings, and this is just one string. Again, this is not an array. This is an array. Question 8, hash tables store what 2 items? And that would be key value pairs. So again, hopefully this was just a quick reminder. Hopefully you remembered all of that. Again, if you need to go back, you can always go back to the previous lessons to go over what you missed. So for the rest of the day, we're going to talk about operators. First, we're going to discuss what is an operator. Then we'll get into arithmetic operators. These are just a simple operators such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And then we'll talk about comparison operators such as less than, greater than, equal to. Then we'll go ahead and go into logical operators. Logical operators like and, or. Then we'll get into array operations. We'll talk about how to do different things with arrays such as add to the end of or do index operations. And then last of all, we'll go ahead and go over some exercises. However, before we dive too far into that, I want to go ahead and cover comments. So comments are very, very useful in any programming language. Comments are helpful to describe and to explain your code. So again, comments in any language are not going to be compiled, which means the computer will pretty much skip over them, knowing that we meant this only for the reader, right? So for example, if you want to do a comment line, in this case, you're going to need, for PowerShell, you do either this pound sign, this hashtag, and then after that. So again, that is going to comment out anything that is after this on that same line. All right. So again, you would comment, usually trying to help describe what you're trying to do in that line or in the following lines. You can also have, so this is a comment line. A comment block is multiple lines. So if I want to have like, 2, 3, 4 lines in between this where the entire thing is commented out, then I would do a less than sign and then my pound or my hashtag and then several lines, and then I got my pound sign and then a greater sign. So anything in between these two parts will be commented out. And a lot of times I'll do a comment block before any of my functions, before my entire code, just kind of describing what that code is. Another useful thing for a comment is whenever you are trying to debug the code or trying to figure out what's wrong with your code, if you're getting errors, is you can comment out a line to see if it's that line that's giving the program difficulty or issues, or if it's something else. So you could always comment out a line by putting a pound sign in front of it, and then if it runs well, then you know it has an issue with that specific line. So again, we'll go ahead and give you a couple examples of this, and then we'll get on to operators. All right, I'm back in PowerShell ISE. I'm going to go ahead at this point and I'm going to show you how to do comments. So comments, again, are very, very important, especially whenever you're learning any code, to be able to write comments. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and do a line comment. And a line comment is going to be your pound sign, and then you can type whatever you want. So in this case, we can go ahead and say, this code was written by Captain Schlack. All right, so again, that is our line comment. Again, anything to the right of that comment is going to be commented out, which is going to be written in green. Now for a comment block, usually the way I do comment blocks is I do the less than, greater than sign, and then I throw 2 pounds in there, and then I separate them. So now anything in between these two will be commented out, and that's the comment block. So usually at the beginning of the code, I'll do a comment block with who wrote the code, what the code is written for, the day, stuff like that, or also before any of the functions that I write, I'll do a comment block. So in this case, let's go ahead and do a comment block. So we could go and say, okay, who's the author of this code? You can do the, the date, 18 February 2022. You can also do, the title, fun code, and then you can finally do like a short description. All right, so again, this, just to recap, this is your comment line, this is your comment block. Now, a lot of times what you're going to do is, for your line comments, you'll have some sort of code, right? So you'll say age equals 45. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and comment describing what you just did there, right? And this is, again, isn't for anyone except for yourself or someone that is reading your code to try to understand what you're trying to do. So for example, age equals 45. I'm going to go and use commenting here, saying that, this line of code assigns 45 to the variable age. Right. So again, this doesn't get compiled. It just kind of skips over, but it's just kind of for us to see, oh, okay, that's what that piece of code is doing. Now we can get into the crux of what we're going to talk about today, which is operators. And again, operators are the core of any program. Operators really allow you to change data, manipulate data, or interact with the user and or the computer. And again, we talked about a lot of different operators. We talked about arithmetic, we talked about comparison, we talked about logical operators, also array operations. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into that. So the first type of operators we're going to talk about are arithmetic operators. Arithmetic operators, again, are used just for mathematical operations. So again, these are all the operators that you've learned about back in elementary school, except for one additional one that's a little bit tricky that we'll go ahead and discuss. So there are going to be 5 arithmetic operators that we talk about in this class: the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then the last one is the percent sign, which actually stands for the modulus operator. So I think for the most part, everyone understands addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division operators, but the last one, the modulus operator, is going to return the remainder of a division problem. So for example, if you're in back to 2nd grade or so, and you take, let's say, 9 divided by 2, all right? So 2 goes into 9 how many times? 4, and it has a remainder of 1 left over. So if you did 9 modulus 2, it's going to tell you what is that remainder. So 9 mod 2 would be a remainder of 1. So 9% sign 2 is going to give you a remainder of 1. Now you'll use modulus quite a bit if you're wanting to determine like even or odd, or if you're wanting to see what is the remainder of some sort of division problem. All right. So again, modulus returns the remainder of that division problem. So we'll go ahead and do, I'll show you some examples in the next section on using these and also using the modulus operation. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start out with just some simple arithmetic, right? So we'll go ahead and do, okay, what is 2 plus 4? 6. Excellent, that makes sense. What is 4 minus 5? We should get -1. Great. 3, again, multiplied by 2, we get 6. Very good. And again, you notice that I have some spaces in there, some not spaces. It really doesn't matter. So if I have like, let's say 20, and then I do divided by 2, right, it's still going to give me 10. Even though there's spaces, it really doesn't recognize it. Now you do have to be careful. So if you do 2 space 0, you're going to get an error because it can't read 20. The number itself has to be together. You can't put spaces in between numbers unless you have some sort of operator in there. So for example, if you have like 2 plus 2, then you'd get 4. Now let's go ahead and discuss specifically the modulus operator, because that's where some students can get hung up a little bit. All right, let's talk about our example before. We had 9 modulus 2. In this example, we get 1 because 9 divided by 2 is 4, but it has a remainder of 1. So then let's go ahead and do some other ones. Let's do 22 mod 3. All right, so 21 divided by 3 is 7. So 22 divided by 3 is 7, but I still have that remainder of 1. All right, so one thing, just so I can, one thing I always like to explain with modulus is think about what are the possible results that you can get. So for example, anytime I'm doing a modulus 2, so if I do 0 mod 2, I get 0. If I do 1 mod 2, I get 1. If I get 2 mod 2, I get 0. If I get 3 mod 2, I get 1. Notice, anytime I do mod 2, right, I either get 0 or 1, which makes sense because anytime I'm dividing by 2, it's either it divides evenly into it, and the remainder will be 0, or it divides by 2 and you get a remainder of 1. But you can never get a remainder of 2 because you're dividing by 2. So one thing that is kind of important to remember is if you're doing a mod 2 or modulus 2, there's two possibilities, right? You can either get a remainder of 0 or a remainder of 1. Now let's say we do another number, let's say 10 mod 3. Now if I'm doing a mod 3, it doesn't matter what my first number is, right? Whatever mod 3, I have three possibilities. Either it goes into an even amount of times and I have a remainder of 0, or I can have a remainder of 1, or I can have a remainder of 2. But I can never have a remainder of 3 because that would also go into an even amount of times. So it's important to really understand what the modulus operator is doing because anytime you do mod 3, you're going to get three possible answers: 0, 1, or 2. Another important thing to understand when doing any sort of mathematical operations is the order of operations. So you probably remember back in your elementary days discussing PEMDAS, right, which is parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. And PowerShell, right, it also follows that order of operations. So again, it's really important that you understand what PowerShell is going to do if you have a sort of mathematical operations all in one line, right? So for example, on this one, we have 2 minus 4 divided by 2 plus 2. Now in this case, what is it going to do first, second, and third, right? So first of all, it looks, are there any parentheses? Nope. Are there exponents? Well, PowerShell really doesn't use exponents. Multiplication, division, or modulus? Yes, here's a division. So therefore, it's going to go through step by step looking for any of these. Now, once it gets to multiplication, division, or modulus, it'll do that first. In this case, we have division. All right, so it'll take 4 divided by 2. This result becomes 2. Now it's going to go next. Are there addition or subtraction? Well, there's subtraction and addition. So because these are on the same level, it'll just do it left to right. So for example, it'll do this minus. So first it'll take this as a 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. So this will be your final result. If we do this example down here, first it's going to look for parentheses. Oh, here's parentheses. So it's going to do this problem first. 2 plus 2. Next, it's going to do a division. So it'll take 4 divided by 4 and get 1. Last, it'll do the subtraction. 2 minus 1. And then it will get the result of 1. So if you want to, go ahead and look at this slide. Go ahead and program X, Y, and Z into your PowerShell, and then do the following three examples. Make sure you check to see what your results are. All right. And then make sure after you plug it in, try doing it on a piece of paper, making sure you get those same results that PowerShell got. And as long as you got the same results as PowerShell, then you were able to realize what it was doing, especially in this example right down here. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure that we're good with our order of operations. We have x is equal to 3, variable y is equal to 4, variable z is equal to 5. Now, if you go ahead and look at our problem here, go ahead and see again if you can solve it before I actually press enter, and then make sure what you got is the same thing that PowerShell has. So ultimately, I want to look at it, and I'm looking again for PEMDAS. I'm looking at my order of operations. The first thing I notice, it has multiplication and it has modulus operations. So it has both of those. Those are both on the same level. So in that case, we're going to do left to right. So we're going to go ahead and do this one first, and then we'll go ahead and do this one next. So what we have here is variable y times variable z, which is going to be 20. And then we're going to take 3 divided by 4. What's the remainder? Well, 4 doesn't go into 3, so the remainder is going to be 3. So in this case, we have 20 here, and then we have 3 right here. Now let's go ahead and do the next ones. We have plus and minus. Those are both on the same level. So then we'll do those left to right. So x is 3. So what is 3 plus 20? Well, that's 23. Minus 3. Well, 23 minus 3 is back to 20 again. So if we press enter, we get 20. So again, make sure that you can understand that math, because it is important that you can get the same result that PowerShell gets. Next up, we're going to talk about comparison operators. Now, comparison operators are used to compare two different values or two different variables. Again, comparison operators, they provide logic so that a script can help make a decision. All right. So you're going to have, hey, is this variable equal to a value, right? Or is this variable less than something? And then ultimately, depending on what is stored inside that variable, it's going to give you a different result. So it's important that you're able to take, for example, hey, is 5 greater than variable A when variable A is 2, right? With comparison operators, they're always going to give you or return a Boolean value, all right? So for example, is 5 equal to 4? No. And whenever I say no, it's going to return false. If I say, is my variable greater than 3? Well, if my variable is 5 greater than 3? Yes. Therefore, PowerShell would return true in that case. And most of the time, you're going to have these comparison operators in our flow control. And a lot of times, it's going to be like in your if statement. So for example, if you're trying to create some sort of condition, you want to make sure that you have your operator, your comparison operator, inside that conditional statement. And again, that's going to return either a true or a false. So let's go ahead and practice with some of those comparison operators. Now, instead of doing variables, because it can get a little bit confusing at first, I'm just going to use straight up numbers. So again, it should be fairly straightforward. So for example, let's go ahead and use our greater than, or less than, or equal to, and so on and so forth. Now, if you're used to other languages, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because you're going to want to use the less than sign, the greater than sign, the equal sign. But if this is your first programming language, then it shouldn't be too hard to catch on. So let's go ahead and do it. So let's say, does 2 equal 2? Now, anytime you're asking a question, that means you're doing a comparison. If you're assigning something, then you would do the assignment operator, which is the equal sign. But in this case, you're just asking the question, does it equal, so you do dash EQ, does it equal 3? Now, hopefully we all know the answer to this is no. All right, so does 2 equal 3? That's no, therefore it returns false. All right, let's do some other ones. Let's say, is 3, is it less than 2? All right, so again, that's a question. All right, LT. Now, don't feel too bad, LTs, that LT is less than. But it's asking the question, is 3 less than 2? Now in this case, we know the answer is false. 3 is not less than 2. 3 is greater than true. So let's go ahead and do that one. So is 3-G2, GT, sorry, 2, is that true? That should be true. 3 is greater than 2. All right, so again, those operators are going to be a little bit tricky. Again, there's equal, less than, greater than. Also, there's less than or equal to. So let's say is 2, less than or equal to 4. That would be true. All right. There's also greater than or equal to. So is 5 greater than or equal to 5? Well, that would be true because it's equal to. All right. So again, those are your operators. You also have not equal to. So is 4 not equal to 4? That would be false because 4 is equal to 4. Is 3 not equal to 9? That would be true. All right. So again, those are the 6 operators that we talked about for comparison operators. And again, make sure you remember they always return a Boolean value. So next we're going to go ahead and discuss logical operators. Now don't get confused. Comparison operators, you're comparing two different values. Logical operators are used when you're trying to connect conditional statements. So for example, an AND, you're connecting two conditional statements, and usually in your conditional statements is where you have your comparison operators, if that makes sense. So for example, if you're doing an AND logical operator, you're comparing a conditional statement on the left-hand side and a conditional statement on the right-hand side. All right, so usually logical operators, you're comparing a statement on the left and a statement on the right. Now that is true for AND, that is true for OR that is true for exclusive OR. Not all you're doing is you're not comparing two different statements or two different things. You're just doing one statement and it's right after that statement. Not just changes if that statement would have been true, changes to false. If that statement would have been false, it changes it to true. So again, logical operators, they can be used to test multiple conditions at the same time. So for example, the AND operator. The AND operator returns true when both statements on the left-hand and the right-hand side are true. However, it would return false if any one of them were false. So again, and both of them must be true to give out true. For OR, it returns true if either statements are true. So again, if one statement is true or the other statement is true, then it will return true. Only one of them has to be true. Now, exclusive OR is similar to OR, except one and only one statement must be true. So in this case, not both. All right, so we'll go ahead and give an example. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and show you the logical operators. Now again, this is our not. So again, if it's false, it would be output of true. If it's true, which is 1, it would output false. Notice here in our AND logical gate, the only one that outputs true is when they both are true. So you have your inputs, your left-hand side, your right-hand side. When they're both true, that is only when you get a true. And again, for AND, they both have to be true. For OR, notice 3 out of the 4 times you get true. So as long as one or the other or both are true, then the output is going to be true. The only time you get false with an OR is if they both are false. Exclusive OR is right down the middle. It's 50-50, right? So one or the other, but not both. So one has to be true and not the other. Or the first one is false and the second one's true for you to get an output of true. So let's go ahead and do an example of that. So again, let's go ahead and do some logical operators. So again, if we have a true statement, and then we're going to do AND, so we do dash AND, and then we have a false, all right? What should happen if I have a true and I have a false? Well, in this case, AND needs both. So if I go and press enter, I get false. Next, let's try true for both, because we know AND needs true for both. So instead of actually using the Boolean values, let's actually go ahead and throw in some comparison operators. So we could say is 3, and I'm going to go ahead and use parentheses here. Is 3 greater than 2? Well, that should be true, right? But again, I can't use greater than. I have to actually use dash GT. So is 3 greater than true? And then we can do and is 4 equal to 4? Well, this is true, because and they both must be true, right? Go and press enter, and I get true, because both of them are true. All right, so let's go ahead and do another one, but let's do it with or. So let's go ahead and change this. Instead of and, we're going to say or. So in this case, we have is 3 greater than true? That's true. Or is 4 equal to 4? Well, because they're both true, or really, it doesn't even need to check the second one, right? Because if the first one is true, And then I have an OR here. Well, I already got one of them true. It really doesn't matter what this one is, right? Because OR just needs one of them to be true. So I press enter, it's going to be true. Now, even if I change this to say, hey, does 4 equal 3? This ultimately will be true, right? Because this one is true. Even though this one's false, I still get a true statement. All right, the only time OR is false is if both things are false. So let's change this to LT. So is 3 less than true? Is 3 less than 2? Nope. Is 4 equal to 3? Nope. This one will be false. All right, and then let's go ahead and do an exclusive OR. Exclusive OR means that one or the other is true, but not both. All right, one or the other, exclusively OR. So in this case, 3 is less than 2. That's false. 4 equals 3 is false. So false, XOR false, of course, is going to be false. If we change one of these to be true, let's say 4 not equal to 3, that would be true. So one of them is true, should give us a true, which it does. And then if we do both true, so let's change this back to greater than. Is 3 greater than 2? Yes, that's true. 4 not equal to 3? Yes, that's true. If they're both true, this should also give us a false, because exclusive OR says one or the other, but not both. The last one that we're going to do is not. All right, not is not comparing two different ones. It's just saying whatever the following conditional statement, we're going to reverse it. If it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes true. So for example, does 4 equal 4? That is true. However, if I say not, and then I say, does 4 equal 4? What happens is it just switches it. So in this case, 4 equals 4, true. But not true becomes false. So next, we're going to go on to array operations. So again, so far we've talked about mathematical operators. We've talked about comparison operators and logical operators, and lastly we're going to talk about array operators. So again, array operators are used to manipulate and access characters stored in arrays based on character position. Now again, this is dealing with index operations. So again, if we want to figure out where something is or pull out a certain position item in an array, you would use the index operator for that. One of the biggest things that you need to remember is that when counting array positions, you start with index 0. So on this bottom part is the index number that is associated with the actual value that is in the array. So for example, if you have an index of 0, that is going to match up to the first item. Index of 1 is going to match up to the second item in that array. Index of 4 will be the fifth item in that array. So if I want to know, hey, what is the first item? That would be index 0. If I want to do the last item, it's going to be however many items there are minus 1, right? So if there's like 10 items, that would be, and you want to get the 10th item, that would be index 9. All right, and again, the biggest thing to remember is that the index number is always 1 less than what item number it is, because you start at index 0 for that first item in the array. And we'll go ahead and show real quick how you do index operations in the next example. All right, so let's go ahead and do index operations. So first of all, let's go ahead and create an array. Let's say our array has items, let's say 34 to 40. All right, so let's go and print out our array. So again, you can see the first item is 34, the second item is 35, so on and so forth until you get to 40. So now let's go ahead and do index operations. To do index operations, you do the variable name, and then right after you do square brackets, and then with the index number on the inside of those square brackets. So again, if you want to do, let's say index 0, right? That should give us the first item, which is 34. And as you can see, it does. So again, let's go ahead and do the same thing, but let's say index 1. So again, index 1 is going to give you the second item. In this case, it should be 35, and it does give us 35. Let's go ahead and do the last item. So what you would do in this case is you have to count how many items there are. In this case, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items. So if we do index 7, it doesn't return anything because that is index 7 is actually the 8th item, which there aren't 8 items. There's only 7 items. So to get the 7th item, which is the last item, you do index 6. Should give us 40, which it does. Now another cool thing about PowerShell is you can actually do negative index values. Negative index values are going to set, instead of starting from the left, negative index values will start from the right. So from the very end of the array. So if I want to do index -1, that's actually the last item in the array. So that would give you 40. So that's an easier way to think about the last item. The second to last item would be -2 index, which would be 39. So again, index operations. Again, also you can actually do range operators and actually get more than one number in there. So you could go, let's say, from index 0 to index 3, which would be the first item through the 4th item. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and that'll give you those four different items from the array. And that is just a quick overview of the range operator. So there are more operations than just the index operator, but again, the index operator, like we talked about before, has the square brackets. Again, if it's index 3, that is going to return the 4th item in the array. There's also some other operations for arrays that we need to talk about. We can talk about the append operator. The append operator is going to be your plus equals, and append is really just adding to the end. So in this case, plus equal is you add and you assign this whatever value to the end of array. So again, what this is going to do is it's going to add this string, new word, to the end of the array. We've already talked about creating a blank array. Remember when we did assignment operator equals to the at and then open and close parentheses. That again creates an array with nothing in it. Another cool thing that you'll use is the dot length operator. Dot length operator, whenever it's attached to arrays, gives you the number of items in that array. All right, so if you have 4 items, it would return the number 4. And then the last operator we'll talk about is reverse. The reverse operator returns the array in reverse order. So the first item becomes last item becomes first, and everything is reverse order. So let's go ahead and show those 3 different things: the append, the length, and the reverse. All right, so let's go ahead and show what our array is. Let's say we want to add something to the end. All right, so that would be the append operator. So again, for the append operator, you still have your array variable, and then you do your plus equals, right? Because what it's going to do is going to add it to the end, and then we can add. Let's say we want to add 43 to the end of our array. So this will take 43, it'll add it and assign it to the end of the array. So press enter. Notice it doesn't actually show it to us because we're just assigning it in this case. For us to actually see if it worked, we go ahead and print out array. And then as you can see, it has all the numbers through 40, and then it added 43 at the end. So again, you can do this. You don't have to actually do 43. You could even do a string. All right. And then let's see what array is. And again, it has 34 to 40, 43, and now it has string at the end of it. Another thing that you want to that we can go ahead and work on is we talk about append, also dot length operator. So if I want to find out, how many items are in this array, all right, we can go ahead and count them, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So .length should return 9, and there are 9 items. Don't get confused. .length will return the actual number of items, whereas the index operator starts with 0. So if I did like, index 8, that would return the 9th item. But .length just actually gives you the number of items that are inside that array. All right, and lastly, I want to go ahead and go over the reverse. So again, for this one, you do array, and then you do colon, colon. Then you're going to do reverse, and then inside your parentheses, or you choose which array variable you want to reverse. So in this case, we're just going to do our regular array. And then we can go ahead and print out array, and it should have reversed everything. So now it's string 43, 40, all the way through 34. So again, if you need to reverse the array for some reason, that would be one quick operator that could do it for you. All right, now we're going to talk real quick about some handy shortcuts. So again, these help you not have to type as many words. Again, if you're not comfortable with it, you don't have to use the shortcuts. I always recommend making sure you understand the full syntax of the command, and then if you're good with that and you're familiar with that, then you can go ahead and use those shortcuts. But again, it's important that you understand what the shortcuts really mean and how they're affected. So we talked about we can replace the current variable with a new version of itself. So notice this right here. You have 3 is equal to my var, right, which is my variable. Now, to reassign something but to add something to it, for example, my var plus 2 is going to take 3 plus 2, and it's add those together, stores it back inside of the variable that we just created, right? So we're taking 3 plus 2, which is 5, storing 5 back into my var. So when you print my var to the screen, it prints out 5. Now this is the exact same thing as this down here. You have plus equals. So what happens is, if you have 5 here, instead of actually saying my var plus 3 equals that, you can say plus equals, which adds it to that variable and then assigns it. So for example, if my var is 5, if we do plus equals 3, it takes 3, it adds it to 5, and then it assigns it back into my var. So now my var should be 8. So you can do plus equals a number, you can do minus equals, multiply equals, and divide equals with numbers. Now this is really, really important that you understand this operator will do different things depending on what variable type it is. If it's a number variable type, it will just add it like you would expect. If it's a string, it will append. It will just concatenate. If it is an array, it'll add it to the end of the array. So you just have to be really careful whenever you're doing that. The last shortcut I want to show you is the plus plus operator. Now the plus plus operator, if it's just a number, it just adds 1 to it and it stores it as that. All right, so plus equals 1 is the same thing as plus plus, because you're taking this variable as a, you say plus plus, now it forces that to add 1 to it, and then it saves it. So now my var is 9. So let's go ahead and do a couple of examples of that just to make sure that we solidify those concepts. All right, so let's go ahead and do the longhand version. Let's say we're trying to add something to another variable. So for example, let's say we have our variable age. Let's say we're 34. Now let's say we want to say, okay, let's add a couple to that number and then save it as our new age. So the long way to do it is say age is equal to age plus 3. So what happens in this case is it takes age, which is 34, adds 3 to it, so it becomes 37. Then it reassigns 37 into the variable age. So we press enter, we print out age, it is 37. Now another shorthand way to do this is we can just say age plus equals 3. Now what happens is, because you have this equal sign, it's going to assign it, but first it's going to add 3 to this age and then assign it back into age. So now what's going to happen is it's going to take age, which is now 37, it's going to add 3 to it to become 40 and assign that back into age. So now age becomes 40. So again, this is the same thing as this, except it's just a shortcut. All right, so you just have to be very careful with that, and you know exactly what it's doing. Now, the last thing we talked about was age plus plus. All right, that just adds 1. All right, plus plus just adds 1 to that variable and assigns it back into itself. So age plus plus should make age 41, which it does. All right, there's also age minus minus, which just subtracts 1 and stores it back into the variable. So in this case, age would go back down to 40. Now, this is where you have to be very careful, because that plus equals operator is going to be different depending on the variable and all that. So, for example, if I have age plus equals 3, if that's not a number, it's going to be doing different things. So let me go ahead and change something up. So let's say I have name equals Bob, right? So now, what is name? Name is a string variable type, right? So if I want to add something to a string, all right? So if I say name plus equals, and I say 5, all right? What do you think it's going to do? Well, let's go ahead and see. All right, let's go ahead and spit out name. Notice it says Bob 5. All it does is it takes it and it pushes it together, right? So if you're confused and you think you're dealing with a number and you're actually dealing with a string, and then you start adding stuff to it, you're going to get different results than what you'd expect. All right, so in the next couple examples, we have some exercises. I want you to go ahead and look through these examples, go ahead and work them out, and you should be good to go. So the exercise, create 2 variables, multiply them together to create a 3rd variable, and then use those comparison operators to compare the new variables to your old variables. All right, the next one, you're going to write 1 line of code that returns true if the variable is even and false if the variable is odd. Again, you want to make sure that you use that modulus operator, which is returning the remainder. Again, keep changing the value of the variable and test your one-liner. And then there are 4 more exercises to do on that page too. So go ahead, see if you can figure those out, and then we'll go on to the next section. All right, so this finishes up the first day. Just to summarize, we talked about what operators were. All right, they help you manipulate data. We talked about arithmetic operators. Again, arithmetic operators are just those simple math operators of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulus. Then we discussed comparison operators. Comparison operators are when you're comparing things and conditional statements like equal to, not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than equal to. So there's 6 of those. Then we discussed logical operators. We discussed 4 logical operators: and, or, XOR, and not. And then we went into array operations. We talked about index operations, append, plus equals, length operator, and then we went over some exercises. Again, this is the first day. You're going to have some homework that I'm going to go ahead and give out to you. So go ahead and work on that. And again, if you need help, please come in the morning for some SIA, and we can go over any questions that you still had concerning this. Good luck.